Welcome. Welcome to all of you here in person and those of you also here online this morning. Today is the final day of Mental Health Awareness Week, and the theme this year has been loneliness. So I called this service Finding Connections in Lonely Times. I often begin by saying everyone's welcome, however you're feeling at this time, and that's particularly true today. Let's begin by lighting our chalice, which is a simple and quite beautiful, I think, way of marking our connection with each other. Do light a candle at home with me if you'd like to. This light is for any one of us, for each of us who has ever felt lonely or isolated, apart or disconnected. It is for you if you have ever felt you don't fit in or you don't belong. In other words, it's a flame for all of us. Our first hymn, it may not be familiar to you, but I found it because I was looking for something suitable. And I mean, it is in the Purple Book, and we do have a recording of it, so you don't have to learn it without help, as it were. It's called Though Gathered Here to Celebrate, and it's number 173. And it felt quite unusually for a gathering hymn. It acknowledges if our spirits are low. So let us see how we get on with hymn number 173. The stillness strips the mask away, exposes lonely hearts. So let us come into a time of stillness. I share a prayer by Gretchen Haley. For this one moment, know only that you are loved. that you are safe and whole and loved. Know that you belong here, here among us, here upon this earth. In your body, however tired or broken your heart may be. Whatever fear, disappointment, anger you carry, for this hour, know that you are not alone. Feel the presence of others surrounding you, breathing beside you and with you. Discovering together the way our voices rise and fall together in harmony, in hope. Claim here a resilient freedom, the choice for love, for light, to live with joy and gratitude and praise as a form of resistance. And into this quietness and stillness, I invite you to bring in your heart and your mind's eye, anyone known to you who is unwell, grieving, anxious, lonely, or suffering in any way at this time. And wish them love and light. And now you may, if you wish, to widen your circle of concern to those unknown to you, those caught up in war, in poverty, those without homes, without safety, those who are struggling to survive in any way. And from our still center, may we allow the warmth of our hearts, the light of our spirits, to travel outwards, like ripples gently reaching out into our beautiful but hurting world. We wish love and light for all beings. Amen. I'm going to read a story, and because I'm doing everything myself today, I'm going to nevertheless move down to the pulpit so you at least get a change of view. Sheila isn't here today, as you may have noticed, so I'll be doing the notices as well. But the good news is I won't be here for the next 2 weeks. So the story is by Arnold Lobel, and it's one of the Frog and Toad stories. But I haven't read one of those recently, and this one's called Alone. Toad went to Frog's house. He found a note on the door. The note said, "Dear Toad, I'm not at home. I went out. I want to be alone." "Alone," said Toad to himself. "Frog has me as a friend. Why does he want to be alone?" Toad looked through the windows and he looked in the garden. He did not see Frog. Toad went to the woods. Frog wasn't there. He went to the meadow. Frog wasn't there either. Toad went down to the river. There was Frog. He was sitting on an island by himself. "Poor Frog," said Toad. "He must be very sad. I will cheer him up." So Toad ran home. He made sandwiches. He made a jug of iced tea. He put everything in a basket and hurried back to the river. Frog shouted, "It's me! It's your best friend." But Frog was too far away to hear. Toad took off his jacket and waved it like a flag. But Frog was too far away to see. Toad shouted and waved, but it was no use. Frog sat on the island. He did not see or hear Toad. A turtle swam by. Toad climbed on the turtle's back. "Turtle," said Toad, "carry me to the island. Frog is there. He wants to be alone." "Well, if Frog wants to be alone," said the turtle, "why don't you leave him alone?" "Maybe you're right," said Toad. "Maybe Frog doesn't want to see me. Maybe he doesn't want me to be his friend anymore." "Yes, maybe," said the turtle as he swam to the island. "Frog," cried Toad, "I'm sorry for all the foolish things I do. I'm sorry for all the silly things I say. Please be my friend again." Toad slipped off the turtle, and with a splash he fell into the river. But Frog pulled Toad up onto the island. Toad looked in the basket. The sandwiches were wet, and the jug of iced tea was empty. "Our lunch is spoiled," said Toad. "I made it for you, Frog, so that you'd be happy." "But Toad," said Frog, "I am happy. I'm very happy. This morning when I woke up, I felt good because the sun was shining. I felt good because I was a frog. And I felt good because I have you as a friend. I wanted to be alone. I wanted to think about how wonderful everything is." "Oh," said Toad, "I suppose that's a very good reason for wanting to be alone." "But now," said Frog, "I will be glad not to be alone. Let's eat our lunch." And a change of tone for our short reading, which is from Kabir, the 15th century Indian mystic. This is a version translated by Robert Bly. Are you looking for me? I'm in the next seat. My shoulder is against yours. You will not find me in stupas, not in Indian shrine rooms, nor in synagogues, nor in cathedrals, not in masses, nor curtains, kirtans, I should say, not in legs winding around your own neck, nor in eating nothing but vegetables. When you really look for me, you will find me instantly. You will find me in the tiniest house of time. Student, tell me, what is God? He is the breath inside the breath. As we come into a period of reflection, I invite you to begin by singing our, it's a short hymn, Spirit of Life, 148, which I invite you to sing remaining seated. We sing it twice, and then we'll move into some silence and some gentle music, which the music actually is a link with Anne's service from last week. It's a little prayer by Evelyn Glennie, who is a percussionist who is deaf. But first, Spirit of Life. So Frog wanted to be alone, and he was perfectly happy sitting on his island by himself, thinking his own thoughts. As Wendell Berry wrote, true solitude is found in the wild places where one is without human obligation. Then one's inner voices become audible, and in consequence, one responds more clearly to other lives. I think Frog would have agreed with that, although he might have put it a bit more simply. Of course, Frog might have become lonely eventually if he hadn't had his friend Toad, who he knew would come looking for him. But loneliness is a completely different kind of feeling, isn't it, from solitude? Olivia Laing wrote a book called The Lonely City. It was about an experience she had of being lonely in New York. And she tries to describe the feeling of loneliness. She wrote, "It feels like being hungry. Like being hungry when everyone around you is readying for a feast. It feels shameful and alarming. And over time, these feelings radiate outwards, making the lonely person increasingly isolated, increasingly estranged. It hurts in the way that feelings do. And it also has physical consequences that take place invisibly, inside the closed compartments of the body. It advances, she says, cold as ice and clear as glass, enclosing and engulfing. I wonder whether that sounds familiar to you at all. I think it's a good description. I wonder whether it helps to hear that others have felt that way. And I wonder how comfortable each of us feels admitting when we feel lonely. Because anyone can feel lonely. At its simplest, loneliness is just a feeling we get when there's a gap, a mismatch between the connections that we have and those that we yearn to have. Which means loneliness can happen in very different circumstances for each of us. It's not about the number of friends we have, or the time we spend on our own, or something that happens when we reach a certain age, although all these factors can contribute. But it can happen at any time, and loneliness is very common. Laing says, though loneliness feels entirely isolating, a private burden no one else could possibly experience or share, it is in reality a communal state, inhabited by many people. Studies suggest that more than a quarter of American adults suffer from loneliness, while 45% of British adults report feeling lonely either often or sometimes. Circumstances can serve as mild deterrents, but the truth is that few of us are absolutely immune to feeling a greater longing for connection than we find ourselves able to satisfy. She wrote that in 2016, and I think loneliness has probably got worse since then as a general state of our society. And it's for young and old alike. You can see it in people's faces. We know that in this country, in England, more than 2 million people over the age of 75 live alone, and more than 1 million older people say they go for over a month without speaking to a friend, a neighbour, or a family member. And however much we may enjoy our own company, I think most of us begin to feel lonely if we're isolated for long periods of time like that. So I live on my own, and in general, I'm quite happy spending time alone. I can identify with Frog sitting on his island. But by the end of last winter's lockdown, as I think I may have said before, I realised I began to feel lonely. The pleasure of having peace and quiet and time to myself had begun to wear off. I craved company and conversation and connection. And being alone turned insidiously, really, from being a feeling of freedom and liberation into one of emptiness and sadness. It crept up on me. I wonder if it has ever crept up on you too. And of course, it's possible, very possible, to feel lonely when surrounded by other people. Like the young woman in the song we heard at the beginning, crying in a crowded street without really knowing why. And perhaps this is a particularly ultra-modern phenomenon. We live in a time in which it's so easy to appear to have lots of friends and have busy lives and know lots of people and live in a bustling city. And yet, relationships can feel quite superficial. And it can feel as though no one really knows us or cares much about us. And maybe we feel we don't know anyone properly either. And unfortunately, rather than encouraging us to reach out more, loneliness tends to make us more withdrawn. So I'm glad that Mental Health Awareness Week wanted to bring loneliness out of the shadows of secrecy and shame and into the light of understanding, to take some of the stigma out of it and encourage us to face and tackle loneliness together. Both for its own sake, but also because, of course, it has other effects. It tends to lead to depression or anxiety, none of which are good for us. There's lots of advice, lots of websites, lots of advice on how you can deal with loneliness or what you might do to feel better. And you can probably imagine the kind of advice. It's all good. It's get more exercise. It's seek out green spaces. It's take an interest in something new. Find someone you can talk to. Volunteer to help others, and so on. And these are good ideas, because in their essence, they're really all about making or remaking, refinding connection. Not distractions, but connections. Vital and nourishing connections that bring us back to ourselves and bring us back into relationship with the world. So connection with our creativity, with our bodies, with other people, with nature, and so on. So yes, it's good to go for a walk in the woods or dance in the kitchen. It's good to chat to the bus driver and smile at a stranger, write a poem, paint a picture, call a neighbour, ring a friend. Come to church. This week I've been waking up really early. I don't know if it's the light, maybe. So I've been going out for a walk before breakfast. And it's been lovely. The sun's been shining. The horse chestnut trees are in flower in Central Park, and they're dropping these beautiful carpets of deep pink petals all over the paths. The rhododendrons are in full bloom. And there aren't many people around at that time, but those who are seem more willing and inclined to smile and say hello. Perhaps there's some sort of camaraderie in being up before other people are up. And the birds are singing their little hearts out. So those are things that help me to reconnect. And I'm wondering what you do when you feel lonely to reconnect. It takes effort to do these things. When we feel lonely or depressed, it's harder still. But reaching out and making connections, even in simple ways, is the way back to belonging. And we would add, surely, reconnecting with the divine, which is everywhere and in everyone and in everything, even in our own breath. Perhaps especially in our own breath. And yet, we have to make space and time to keep that relationship alive and vital. Otherwise, we can quite quickly, I think, feel disconnected and apart. So Kabir said, "Are you looking for me?" Meaning the divine. Are you looking for me? I'm in the next seat. My shoulder is against yours. When you really look for me, you will find me instantly. I am the breath inside the breath. This extraordinarily intimate and all-encompassing relationship, which some of us call God, is always right there. It's always right here. How do you rediscover your connection with the God of your understanding, particularly when you feel alone, when that cold ice of loneliness creeps in? Of course, just because loneliness is an unpleasant feeling, that doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean we have to distract ourselves out of it as soon as possible. Just like any other feeling, loneliness brings its own gifts, even if they're not immediately obvious or welcome. So for me, experiencing loneliness has helped me see more clearly how much I need other people, how important it is for me to connect with the things I love. It has woken me up more to my own vulnerability. I'm not as independent as I like to think I am. And it's made me more understanding of other people's loneliness too. And it has confirmed for me once again how much I really do need to regularly connect with that divine presence in which we each live and move and have our being. That place where ultimately there can be no loneliness at all. May it be so. Our final hymn is number 204, and it's called When I Am Frightened. Hymn number 204. So I wanted to close with one of my favourite poems, which many of you will know anyway. It's Wild Geese by Mary Oliver, which I think is a really good reminder that we do belong, even when we don't feel we do. And I do encourage all of you to really think about how you connect. What brings you into that space where you feel you belong? What to do with those feelings when you don't? And how we might be able to support each other in those times. But here is Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over again, announcing your place in the family of things. Amen.